A popular campfire story in the United States tells of a summer night when a young man was on a date with his new girlfriend. They drove out to Lover's Lane and parked the car in a secluded spot. The boy put his arm around the girl and switched on the car radio so they could listen to some romantic music. They began kissing, and suddenly the music stopped and a newsperson's voice came on the radio. This is an emergency announcement. Earlier tonight, a crazed murderer escaped from the state mental asylum. Police are warning citizens to be on the lookout since the patient is considered armed and dangerous. The patient is called the Hook Man since he lost his right hand in an accident and it was replaced with a steel hook. Be on the lookout for a man fitting this description. If you see anything suspicious, report to the police immediately. The girl became frightened and asked to be taken home. Everyone knew the asylum was not far from Lover's Lane. The boy assured his girlfriend they were safe. He locked all the car doors and tried to kiss her again. She became frantic and pushed him away. The boy was angry, and he slammed the car into gear and spun its wheels as he pulled out of the parking space. When they pulled up outside the girl's house, the boy got out of the car and walked around to open the door for his girlfriend. For a long time, he just stood there, staring at the door. At first, the girl couldn't figure out what was wrong. Then she realized that her door was still locked. She smiled and unlocked it. Still, the boy just stood there. The girl was puzzled and rolled down her window. She saw the boy staring down at the door handle. Slowly, she looked down herself and there, hanging from the door handle, was a bloody stainless steel hook. In the United States, each state has their specific stories and legends, and although some overlap, like the story of Hook Man, some are unique to each state. Come on a journey with us to explore stories and legends from the United States. In the state of New York, Lake Ronkonkoma is Long Island's largest freshwater lake and was a popular summer destination. According to legend, it is said to be the home of a vengeful spirit that claims one male life per year. Ronkonkoma was a Native American princess who fell in love with a white settler, but their union was forbidden by her father. Every night they would sneak out to send messages of love to one another. Ronkonkoma would paddle her canoe out to the middle of the lake, where she would float a message the rest of the way to her lover, waiting on the opposite shore. This continued for years, until one day the princess was unable to deal with this arrangement. She sent a final farewell note to her lover. He received it on the shore, and minutes later, the canoe washed up in front of him as well. Inside it was the princess's body. She had committed suicide in the middle of the lake. Since that day, Ronkonkoma has haunted the lake, becoming known as the Lady of the Lake. Angered because she wasn't allowed to love in life, she now drags one man into the lake each year. People say that at least one person has drowned each year in Lake Ronkonkoma for the past 200 years, the large majority of them male. Many others have reported being drawn by some unseen force out to the center of the lake, as if something was trying to drag them in. In Hawaii, there are many local ghost stories, but the one that scared the most were the night marchers. They have been known to make appearances on several islands, but the most talked about place is along the Pali Highway on Oahu, where the final battle of King Kamehameha took place. In this battle, many warriors were driven off the cliff to their deaths. Legend says that during certain phases of the moon, a procession of ghost warriors marches through, And should you be unfortunate enough to encounter them, you need to drop to the ground and avert your eyes. You cannot interrupt their march or look directly at them, or you or someone you know will die. But if you hear the faint sounds of drums pounding in the distance, or see a barrage of torches out on the horizon, you know it's time to change your route and get away from the march line. In Alabama, there's an eerie playground adjacent to Maple Hill, Huntsville's oldest cemetery. The playground was designed to entertain kids while their parents visited the graves of loved ones. Legend has it, though, that the spirits of children who've been buried in the cemetery since the first grave was dug there in 1822 come out to play at night. The living have observed orbs of light going down the slide, have seen swings moving on their own, and even heard giggling. Creepier still, some say the spirits include victims of a rash of child murders that happened in the 1960s, when the bodies were rumored to have been found in the area that now houses the playground. It's easy to feel uneasy while driving through the desolate desert roads of Arizona, especially at night, and particularly when you hear a short burst of taps on your window while cruising at 80 miles per hour, and turn to see the shape-shifting, mutilated, half-human creature responsible for the high-speed interruption. Relax. It's only trying to rip the flesh off your bones. There's even a defined and well-documented portion of the state known as Skinwalker Ranch, where you are most likely to see one of the creatures. Not that you'd actually want to, though. The Skinwalkers, like so many ancient American urban legends, have roots in Native American folklore. They are men who've transformed into malevolent, murderous creatures that have no problems using their spiritual powers to kill. Navajo medicine men are trained to learn both good and evil aspects of their power, and skinwalkers are those who have turned to the dark side, walking around at night looking for their next victim, which might just be you. Located near Los Angeles between Whittier and City of Industry, Turnbull is a 49,000-acre smorgasbord of nightmare fuel set amid the scenic hills. You want your scares rooted in American history? The natives called it Hutunga, or the place of the devil, where the ghosts of those slain for not converting to Christianity dwell alongside witches and Satanists, who reportedly used the place to sacrifice children, whose spirits now walk the canyon and dangle from trees. They're joined by the ghosts of 21 kids who perished in a plane crash back in 1952. Then there's the remains of the old insane asylum that came back to life to kill a teen in the 1960s through a long dormant electrical wire. The place's evil vibes date back centuries, though it wasn't until the site was established as a fur trapping site in 1845 that things really started getting intense, with word of the site's terrorists traveling far and wide and making it a place visited as much for its beauty as for morbid curiosity. The Florida Everglades are filled with an array of terrifying creatures: man-eating alligators, man-eating snakes. However, one human-like figure has been spotted enough times to warrant elevated levels of concern: the skunk ape. A relative of Bigfoot, a fully grown skunk ape stands anywhere from 5 to 7 feet tall and weighs approximately 450 pounds. They can be detected by a horrific odor that's been described as sun-baked animal carcass and rotting garbage. They mostly eat berries and small animals, but from time to time they've been known to ravage farms and tear wild boars to shreds. No one can say for sure where the legend came from, but because its lineage can be traced back to Bigfoot, many believe it migrated south from the mountains and found refuge in the swamplands, an environment safe from humans with ample sustenance and room to roam. Should you find yourself camping in the Everglades and you smell something foul, take caution. It could be the skunk ape. In an Illinois cemetery is an elaborate marble statue of a woman in her wedding dress. But that's not what's driven the Italian bride to be a subject of local fascination. Upon closer inspection, there is an actual photo plaque on the gravesite of a woman in a casket looking perfectly preserved, even though, as an inscription notes, the photo was taken 6 years after burial, after the body was exhumed. Reports of unusual activity cover everything from the smell of fresh flowers near the gravesite in the dead of winter to a ghostly figure of a woman in white roaming the cemetery, or the halls of nearby Proviso West High School in the dead of night. In 1921, recently married Julia Bacala Peda died in childbirth and was buried in her wedding dress. Legend has it, her mother immediately began experiencing nightmares that Julia was demanding her grave be reopened. The source of the distress varies depending on the storyteller, often relating to some sort of discontent with Julia's new husband. But what isn't in dispute is that 6 years later, the mother got her wish and Julia's body was exhumed, allowing everyone to see her pristine condition. Her body had not rotted away during those 6 years. Does her body look for rest or her possible murderer? In Pilot's Knob, Kentucky, one can see young Mary Evelyn Ford's grave, which feels a bit unnerving. It has a series of interlocking white crosses forming a fence around a pit of gravel and the bars appearing unnaturally bent in some places. Then you hear the alleged backstory. A mother and daughter both accused of witchcraft and burned at the stake in 1916, with the mother's charred remains being carried off to a far-off location, while the daughter was buried in a steel-lined coffin covered in stone and encased in crosses to prevent her escape. Some have claimed to witness tiny footprints appearing in the gravel, or even a young ghostly figure trying to escape the gravesite. And kid ghosts, as we know, are the creepiest ghosts. Maryland's infamous Goat Man allegedly does all the things you would expect a deranged half-goat, half-man to do. Kill teenagers, eat dogs, scream like a goat. But the most terrifying aspect is just how deep this lore goes. The USDA was even forced at one point to publicly deny accidentally creating the beast in their Beltsville Agricultural Research Center. Another tale revolves around a goat farmer who, after realizing a group of rowdy teens had killed his tribe, went totally crazy and turned into a teen-slaying goat monster. The lore had been around for a while. The first recorded media mentions of the Goat Man occurred in 1971. It was followed by an actual news item about a family blaming the brutal decapitation of their puppy on the Goat Man. 1 month later, the Washington Post ran a national feature detailing the legend of the Goat Man. Ultimately, the Goat Man has become one of America's most persistent and well-known urban legends, with claimed sightings still occurring with regularity. The Salem witch trials were creepy enough to begin with, but the story of Giles Corey, who was slowly pressed to death under a series of progressively heavier rocks in an effort to extract a confession, is particularly unsettling. Legend has it that he uttered a curse against Salem, Massachusetts right before his dying breath. For generations, his apparition has allegedly appeared in the cemetery before something terrible is about to happen, including a 1914 fire that burned down a sizable portion of the city. There has also been a series of tragedies that have hit the Salem Sheriff's Office, starting with the 1696 heart attack that killed George Corwin 4 years after he presided over the trials. Elias Frisk was a deranged old preacher who, according to blood-curdling lore, Pied Pipered a group of tethered children into the woods near what is now Algoma Township in Michigan. He slaughtered them one by one, casting them into Cedar Creek before being caught by their parents and hanged. But not before saying he was possessed by demons. In its current form, Hell's Bridge is a creaky, narrow metal footbridge in the middle of the woods, where those brave enough to cross at night claim to hear the voices and screams of children, and are sometimes greeted by a black figure with glowing eyes as they cross it. Anyone who's visited the bridge will attest that there's something out there, and it usually makes its presence known as you're teetering on a shaky metal bridge in the moonlight. Area 51 lore has been satirized, remixed, and riffed on so much in popular culture. Sometimes it's hard to remember how creepy this whole deal is in the first place. But secret government cover-ups, dead aliens, and playing God in the middle of the desolate Nevada desert is creepy enough. It's been said that everything from time travel, genetic experiments, and alien autopsies are commonplace at Area 51. No one outside of the high government knows what goes on in there. Area 51 is a real, highly classified military base in the southern portion of Nevada. Its purpose is publicly unknown. But in the early 1950s, in the infant stages of the Cold War, President Eisenhower approved plans to build the U-2 stealth plane and created Area 51 to house the development labs and test field. When reports of the admittedly spacecraft-looking plane floated through the public and media, theories spread, and the conjecture around Roswell's alien crash site only fanned the flames of speculation. From there, it's been the epicenter for all U.S. government suspicion. The Ohio Melonheads is a legend about pale, sickly, genetically altered children with giant heads and razor-sharp teeth that simply love killing babies. And you. These Melonheads haunt the woods of Kirkland and are apparently the adopted children of an unscrupulous doctor who used the pre-Melonheads to test new medical and surgical methods with horrifying results. The Melonhead children scurry around through the dark woods, looking for lonesome victims or solitary campers. They are known to chirp like birds, making their unsuspecting victim think a small bird has fallen from its nest or been hurt, only to sink their teeth in their victim when he or she gets too close. A According to legend, after a tragic childhood accident, Charlie No Face, also known as the Glowing Green Man, lost his face and turned radioactive, literally glowing a toxic green as he stalks western Pennsylvania highways at night. His main haunt is Piney Fork Tunnel, an abandoned freight tunnel in Hillsville. But if you seek him out, keep your foot on the accelerator. If he even manages to touch your car, it might stall out. Then you'll be hanging out with Charlie No Face for the rest of your probably short life. This legend is based on a real person, Ray Robinson, who was severely electrocuted by a trolley wire. He walks western Pennsylvania Route 351, but only at night. His mouth was fused shut by the accident, but he has a hole in the side of his face through which he smokes cigarettes. Those who have seen him claim that just before you see him, you can smell his cigarette smoke. Rhode Island's home to many a haunted house, including the one that inspired The Conjuring. But one legend you can experience without trespassing is the tale of Mercy Brown. It seemed that back in the day, Rhode Island was in the midst of a vampire panic, and its most famous victim was 19-year-old Mercy Brown. After her mother and sister died, Mercy succumbed to tuberculosis as well. Due to the panic, villagers presumed something supernatural was going on. When they exhumed Mercy, her body was remarkably well preserved. So they removed her heart and liver, burned them down to ashes, and fed them to her sick brother. He died 2 months later. They say the spirit of Mercy, though, still haunts the cemetery of Exeter, where her gravesite remains a place where morbid tourists flock and the chill hangs perpetually in the air. A wave of suicides, 103 attempts as of December 2014 on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota, is being attributed to the presence of the Walking Sam figure. Teenagers claim a slender, shadow-like spirit dubbed Walking Sam appears before them and commands them to kill themselves. Sound familiar? The first wave occurred in 2013 when 5 members of the Oglala Sioux tribe killed themselves and continued to spiral until Oglala Sioux tribe Vice President Thomas Poorbear discovered photos on Facebook in 2015 depicting nooses hanging from trees, revealing plans behind a teenage group suicide. A young woman and her boyfriend were driving home one night in the dark. Naturally, it was a quiet country road, and typically their car ran out of gas. If they had been 21st century millennials, they could have pulled out their mobile phones. But we're talking back in the days when the only phone was at home, in your parents' house. The boyfriend realized there was only one thing to do: walk to find some assistance. Worried about his girlfriend's safety, he told her to stay in the car and wait for him. He locked her in carefully, getting her to check the doors were secure before leaving. The woman did as he asked, waiting nervously in the car, trying not to notice the trees on either side of her or the pitch black of the road ahead. She waited. And she waited. The boyfriend didn't return. Just as she was about to get out and go after him, she noticed a figure at the driver's window. Breathing a sigh of relief, she turned, welcoming smile already in place. However, what she saw soon wiped the grin clean off her face. Instead of her boyfriend, a stranger stood at the window, staring in at her. The woman screamed, though was relieved to see the car doors were still locked. Slowly, the man moved closer, then started to raise his hand. She worried that it would be a hammer or something he would use to smash through the glass. The man held aloft her boyfriend's decapitated head. She screamed, covered her eyes, and again checked the doors, which thankfully were still locked shut. But it wasn't over. The stranger raised his other hand and jingled the car keys in her direction. Legends, urban legends, and plain-out ghost stories are an important part of culture. What scares us and what keeps us up at night when we're all alone in a dark, dark house says a lot about who we are and what we believe. Next time you're in a dark, dark house, pay no attention to the memories of these stories or the footsteps.